This isn't just a debate, it's a showdown between two Americas. One fighting for change, the other clinging to the past. What happens when passion meets power? Stay tuned, because this gets intense. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. The tension inside the Senate chamber was thick. You could almost hear the hum of conflict before a single word was exchanged. The topic on the floor? Economic policy, corporate tax breaks, and the growing divide between America's wealthiest and working-class citizens. The hearing opened. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, known to millions as AOC, was ready to pounce. Her tone was direct, her message sharp. Armed with a binder of charts, economic data, and a fiery sense of justice, she was on a mission to expose what she viewed as systemic corruption favoring corporations over communities. She stood tall, poised behind the microphone, her eyes scanning the room. She didn't mince words. We continue to hand out billions in tax breaks to the wealthiest corporations, while our teachers buy school supplies with their own paychecks. How is that justifiable? She asked, her voice unwavering. Around her, murmurs filled the chamber. Some nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably. Then came the moment when Senator John Kennedy, a seasoned Republican from Louisiana, leaned into his microphone. With his signature Southern drawl and ever-present twinkle of sarcasm, he replied with a comment that would instantly raise eyebrows. "Well, bless your heart, Congresswoman," Kennedy said, pausing for effect. "But that's not how the economy works, ma'am." It was a line dipped in condescension, one Kennedy likely thought would be brushed off easily. But AOC wasn't having it. Without hesitation, and with the fire of someone used to being underestimated, she fired back, fast and fierce. "Senator, with all due respect," she began, her voice calm but ice-edged. "You represent what happens when people lose touch with reality. You don't represent the people, you represent when people lose." The air in the chamber shifted. There was no going back now. AOC wasn't just responding. She was dismantling the entire worldview Kennedy had just tried to assert. And then, in a moment that would be clipped, shared, and memed across the internet, she dropped the bomb. "Frankly, you're a joke. And the country deserves better." Silence. The kind of silence that hangs for just a second too long. The kind that signals everyone's stunned. Kennedy blinked. His signature smirk faltered. The staffers sitting behind both figures tried not to show emotion, but a few eyes widened. The C-SPAN cameras captured it all. AOC's deadly precision and Kennedy's frozen expression that it wasn't just a spicy comeback. It was a culmination of years of pent-up frustration from a younger generation fed up with political doublespeak and perceived hypocrisy. AOC had vocalized what many progressives had long believed, that some in Congress had grown too cozy with wealth and power to see the real suffering happening in the streets of the country they claimed to serve. Meanwhile, to AOC, Kennedy's "bless your heart" remark wasn't just patronizing. It was a symbolic slap in the face, a reminder of how women, especially young women of color, are often dismissed or belittled when challenging the status quo. The internet reacted in real time. Clips of the exchange hit Twitter, now X, within minutes. Political analysts began chiming in. Some praised AOC for standing her ground, calling her the voice of accountability. Others called it performative, arguing that real change doesn't come from sound bites. But no matter the opinion, one thing was certain: everyone was watching. The hashtag #SVSKennedy started trending. TikTok creators reenacted the moment. Late-night hosts previewed the clip with their signature spin. Even some of AOC's usual critics admitted the moment was politically brilliant. But beyond the noise, the moment struck a deeper chord. It reminded the country of the generational clash now defining American politics. AOC wasn't just confronting Kennedy. She was confronting an entire system she believed was failing the people. And Kennedy, to his credit, was defending the institutional framework he felt had served the country well for decades. Their clash wasn't personal. It was philosophical. But in that flash of a moment, when AOC called Kennedy a joke, the stakes felt real. Not because of the insult, but because of the raw conviction behind it. She meant every word. And whether you loved her or hated her, you couldn't ignore her. It was one of those rare political moments that cuts through the noise. A moment where Two powerful ideologies collide in full view of the public. A moment that won't be forgotten anytime soon. The room was silent, not the kind of casual pause that happens between speeches, but the heavy, pulsing kind of silence that signals a line has been crossed. The air in the Senate chamber felt charged, like the final moment before a thunderstorm breaks. All eyes turned to Senator John Kennedy, the Republican from Louisiana known for his colorful metaphors, sharp wit, and that unmistakable Southern charm. But this time, his charm had been challenged, and publicly. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had just unleashed a verbal grenade, calling him a joke in front of the entire chamber and the watching world. Her words were sharp, biting, and calculated. The moment was raw, political theater at its peak. Kennedy sat still for a moment, lips pursed, as if weighing the cost of silence. Then, slowly, he leaned forward, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, and looked AOC dead in the eye. His voice, calm and deliberate, sliced through the tension like a knife. "Congresswoman," he began, "I may be a joke to you, but at least I'm not a meme." The line landed like a slap. There was a beat, a short breath of stunned quiet, and then a low wave of murmurs rippled through the chamber. He wasn't done. "I've been fighting for my people before you were old enough to vote." Ouch. A pointed reference not just to his experience, but to the generational divide that now defines so much of American politics. It was a clear shot across the bow, drawing a line between youthful passion and seasoned pragmatism. But the senator still wasn't finished. Straightening in his chair, he added the final flourish. "I'd rather be underestimated and effective than loud and lost. If experience is a joke, then consider me comedy gold, darling." The delivery was pitch perfect, deadpan and dripping with irony. Gasps echoed through the chamber. A few chuckles escaped from both sides of the aisle. Even some aides who had been furiously typing notes paused to glance up, eyebrows raised. One senator visibly bit back a smile that it was a rare moment of levity in an otherwise tense hearing. But, make no mistake, this wasn't just about wordplay. It was a battle of public perception, and Kennedy had just fired back with the skill of a seasoned orator. Outside the Capitol, the internet lit up like wildfire. Hashtag Kennedy claps back was trending. On X, formerly Twitter, within 10 minutes. Within an hour, so was hashtag OCVS Kennedy. The exchange was clipped, captioned, and memed at breakneck speed. One popular meme featured Kennedy with sunglasses edited onto his face, standing in front of an explosion with the caption, "Comedy gold, darling." Another clip paired the moment with WWE-style commentary and a sound effect of a microphone dropping. But beyond the humor and viral edits, serious debate erupted online. Supporters of Kennedy hailed his response as classy, savage, and totally deserved. Conservative commentators praised his ability to maintain composure while turning the tables with wit rather than anger. On the other hand, progressive voices defended AOC's bluntness, arguing that her criticism was rooted in truth, that the old guard in Congress too often talks in clever soundbites without delivering real change. Cable news anchors jumped in quickly. On MSNBC, one host said, "This is the political equivalent of an action movie one-liner, except it's playing out on the Senate floor." On Fox News, a commentator remarked, "Say what you want about Kennedy, but that comeback will be taught in debate classes." It wasn't just pundits and influencers getting involved. Average citizens on both sides of the aisle took to the internet to voice their opinions. Some called the exchange entertaining but sad, pointing out that viral moments shouldn't overshadow actual policy debates. Others saw it differently. A symbolic clash between two very different visions of leadership. That Kennedy's comeback reflected a worldview grounded in tradition, hierarchy, and experience. AOC's challenge came from a place of urgency, youth, and a demand for radical change. Their exchange wasn't just a personal spat. It was a collision of eras. The moment lingered in the air. Every question and statement afterward felt just a bit more careful, a bit more measured, as if the whole room had been reminded that, in this new political age, every word can go viral. By evening, late-night comedy shows had already picked it up. Jimmy Fallon laughed through a reenactment with puppets. Trevor Noah dissected the tone and delivery, calling it a masterclass in old-school burn. TikTok teens reenacted both sides with dramatic music and quick cuts. And just like that, a Senate hearing on economic policy, a subject usually buried under charts and jargon, had become must-watch political drama. But underneath all the memes and media buzz, something deeper was happening. AOC and Kennedy had pulled the curtain back on the real tension shaping Congress today. Not just left versus right, but old guard versus new wave, insider versus disruptor, and eloquence versus bluntness. Point one thing was certain. The next time these two shared a room, everyone would be watching and listening. Within hours of the heated Senate exchange, the moment had left the walls of Congress and entered the bloodstream of the internet. Clips of the back and forth between Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator John Kennedy were everywhere, splashed across YouTube thumbnails, embedded in TikTok edits, reposted in Twitter threads, and broken down in Instagram reels. What began as a tense confrontation over economic policy quickly became a viral cultural moment, cutting across politics, media, and entertainment. Political commentators wasted no time dissecting the exchange. On CNN, anchors debated the symbolism of AOC's fierce rebuke versus Kennedy's smooth clapback. MSNBC pundits praised her for channeling the frustration of younger Americans fed up with what they see as outdated leadership. Meanwhile, Fox News lauded Kennedy's ability to stand his ground without losing his cool, calling his comeback a masterclass in Southern political theater. Influencers jumped in too. TikTok creators recreated the scene with dramatic music overlays and costume changes. One viral post showed two creators acting out the dialogue while lip-syncing to audio of the actual exchange, cut between reaction shots of stunned onlookers. It was political theater meets TikTok storytelling, snappy, emotional, and impossible to ignore. On Twitter, the hashtags #ICVSKennedy, #Kennedy claps back, and #Comedy Gold Darling all trended by midday. Users lined up on either side of the ideological divide, choosing sides like fans rooting for rival fighters. Threads dissected every word, every gesture, every raised eyebrow. One user wrote, "AOC came with the heat. Kennedy came with the sauce. This is what democracy looks like, messy and savage." Another replied, "She burned him, but he roasted her back." This wasn't just a political debate, it was a duel. Meme culture quickly went into overdrive. One popular meme featured a split-screen image, AOC under the caption, "Spits fire," and Kennedy under, "Returns it with napalm." The visual went viral, racking up over 200,000 shares within the first 24 hours. Others leaned into pop culture references. One meme placed the two in a boxing ring, complete with pixelated health bars and Mortal Kombat-style "Finish him" text. Another superimposed AOC and Kennedy's faces over characters from the film The Devil Wears Prada, labeling AOC as the rising intern and Kennedy as the veteran boss. It wasn't long before the late-night talk shows joined the fun. On The Tonight Show, Jimmy Fallon replayed the clip and quipped, "That moment had more tension than my last family reunion." He then imagined a Netflix miniseries titled Capital Burn, The AOC Kennedy Chronicles. Stephen Colbert, on The Late Show, took it further. In his monologue, he joked, "AOC called him a joke. Kennedy called her a meme." Honestly, this is the most entertaining Senate hearing since that time Ted Cruz brought a snowball to disprove climate change. The crowd roared with laughter, but beyond the humor, many commentators saw the exchange as a symbol of the larger generational and ideological rift gripping American politics. On podcasts and opinion shows, analysts argued that AOC's unapologetic style reflects a growing movement, demanding accountability and urgency. Kennedy, by contrast, represented institutional experience, confidence under fire, and the power of tradition wrapped in charm. Neither side backed down, and the public responded to the authenticity of it all. Young voters flooded social media in support of AOC, calling her a voice of the future, the Gen Z whisperer, and a disruptor in the best way. They praised her for challenging power directly, saying she reflected the kind of leadership they crave: honest, confrontational, and unafraid. Meanwhile, conservative voices and older voters rallied around Kennedy. They applauded his cool demeanor, his verbal finesse, and his refusal to take the bait. Many said his comeback showed respect under fire and demonstrated that experience can speak louder than volume. In short, this was more than just a Senate moment. It became a national conversation. The AOC versus Kennedy face-off marked a cultural inflection point, a reminder that in today's hyper-connected world, political moments don't stay confined to committee rooms or congressional transcripts. They're watched, clipped, remixed, debated, and immortalized in meme form. And while policy specifics may fade from memory, that 5-minute verbal brawl will live on, not just as a moment of political drama, but as a reflection of the passion, tension, and entertainment now woven into the American political experience. Whether you viewed it as democracy at its finest or politics as spectacle, one thing was clear: everyone had something to say, and no one was changing the channel. Beyond the viral clips, trending hashtags, and comedic late-night retellings, the confrontation between Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, and Senator John Kennedy tapped into something far more profound: a widening fault line in American politics. Their verbal clash was more than a dramatic moment. It served as a public illustration of the growing generational and ideological divide that is shaping the future of the United States. At its core, the exchange wasn't simply about economic policy or rhetorical one-upmanship. It was a symbolic collision of political philosophies, lived experiences, and cultural languages, each reflecting competing visions for what the country is and what it should become. That AOC, the progressive vanguard AOC, embodies the boldness and urgency of a new political generation. Young, outspoken, and unafraid to challenge entrenched systems, she has made a name for herself as a champion of progressive causes. Whether it's climate action through the Green New Deal, taxing the ultra-wealthy, forgiving student loan debt, or addressing systemic racism and gender inequality, she doesn't just advocate change, she demands it. Her style is unapologetically direct, often confrontational, and deeply rooted in a belief that the system itself is flawed and needs transformation. To her supporters, AOC is more than a congresswoman. She's a catalyst for generational justice. She speaks the language of activism and urgency, resonating deeply with millennials and Gen Z who feel betrayed by political inertia and burdened by the consequences of decisions they didn't make. The economic instability, climate crisis, and skyrocketing cost of living they face are not abstract to her. They are front and center in her policy and rhetoric. That's why her remarks during the Senate hearing, delivered with passion and precision, struck a chord. She wasn't just debating Kennedy. She was challenging the institution itself. Her message: the old ways have failed, and the future requires bold, unflinching truth. Senator Kennedy. The traditional conservative on the other side stood Senator John Kennedy, a seasoned legislator from Louisiana known for his Southern charm, sharp wit, and deeply rooted conservative values. Kennedy doesn't just represent the Republican Party. He represents a generation raised on Reagan-era ideals of limited government, personal responsibility, and market-driven solutions. That Kennedy's style is notably different from AOC's. He favors metaphor over manifesto, drawing on homespun analogies and well-timed barbs. His approach is less about confrontation and more about control, a steady, calculated deployment of words that disarm opponents with a smile. For many on the right, Kennedy exemplifies what they see as the ideal public servant: calm under pressure, respectful of tradition, and experienced in the nuances of governance. His response to AOC's fiery accusations was delivered with composed confidence, laced with irony and humor, tools that conservatives admire as signs of leadership rather than weakness. Where AOC radiated urgency, Kennedy exuded institutional endurance. That a battle of generations and of America's identity. What made their exchange so electric wasn't just the words. It was what those words represented. In that moment, viewers weren't just watching a Democrat and a Republican spar over policy. They were witnessing a struggle between two distinct Americas. One is young, diverse, digital, and demanding structural change. It believes the American dream is out of reach unless power structures are dismantled and rebuilt. The other is older, rooted in tradition, skeptical of rapid change, and focused on preserving a system they believe, while imperfect, still works with reform, not revolution. It's this dynamic: progress versus preservation, urgency versus experience, disruption versus tradition, that gives their exchange such cultural resonance. It wasn't just politics, it was philosophy clashing in real time. and the public reaction reflected that divide. Some hailed AOC as a truth teller, a warrior for justice who dares to speak the uncomfortable truth. Others saw Kennedy as the adult in the room, refusing to be baited and responding with poise and perspective. Both were praised. Both were criticized. But what couldn't be ignored was that their encounter forced Americans to think about which version of leadership they believe in. The broader impact in an era where most political debates are sanitized and scripted, this moment felt raw and real. And perhaps that's why it spread so quickly, because it tapped into emotions that go beyond policy papers and talking points. It spoke to identity, belonging, and belief. Are we a nation that needs to tear down and rebuild, or one that should preserve, refine, and evolve? The AOC versus Kennedy clash didn't answer that question, but it certainly asked it in the most public way possible. And for a country standing at a crossroads, it was a powerful reminder that the future isn't just being decided at the ballot box. It's being shaped in every fiery exchange, every viral clip, and every generational voice that dares to speak. So what's next for these two political titans? Their fiery exchange on the Senate floor has already cemented itself as a moment that won't be forgotten anytime soon. But beyond the viral clips and meme-worthy one-liners lies a more important question. How will this clash shape the future paths of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and John Kennedy? And what does it mean for the broader political landscape? AOC, fuel. For the movement in interviews following the confrontation, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez didn't flinch. She stood firmly by her words and doubled down on her commitment to challenging the status quo. I'm not here to be polite. I'm here to be honest. And if honesty hurts feelings, so be it, she told one reporter bluntly. That quote made the rounds just as quickly as the original exchange, earning both praise and criticism. For her supporters, it was quintessential AOC. Sharp, unapologetic, and unafraid to speak truth to power. For detractors, it was further proof of what they see as performative politics, strong on rhetoric, weak on substance. Regardless of where one stands, AOC's strategy is clear. Lean into authenticity, elevate progressive causes, and mobilize younger generations. This moment isn't an anomaly. It's a calculated part of her larger brand and mission. And with growing speculation about her long-term ambitions, perhaps a Senate run, or even a future White House bid, moments like this help her build national momentum and grassroots loyalty. Every time AOC sparks national conversation, she further solidifies her position as the face of a movement. Not just as a politician, but as a cultural force who understands how media, activism, and identity intersect in the modern age. And if this showdown with Kennedy raised her visibility among independents or disillusioned voters, it may prove to be a turning point in her evolution from insurgent to institution builder. Senator Kennedy, the steady hand in the other side of the aisle, Senator John Kennedy showed no signs of backing down either. In his signature folksy charm, he responded to the dust-up with a smirk and a well-placed jab. She's got spunk, I'll give her that. But I prefer results over rhetoric. His calm, measured response earned applause from his base, many of whom saw his performance not as flashy, but firm and seasoned. Kennedy's strength lies not in viral moments, but in his ability to weather storms without losing composure. And that contrast with AOC's fiery approach is precisely what makes him such a compelling foil in the modern political arena. In the wake of the exchange, Kennedy's support among conservative commentators only grew. Some even floated the idea of him taking on a larger role in shaping the GOP's future, possibly positioning him as a voice of experience in a party grappling with its own identity crisis. While others in his party embrace chaos or controversy, Kennedy offers something different, a disciplined, articulate conservatism that harkens back to pre-Trump republicanism, mixed with just enough flair to keep things interesting. As the 2024 and 2026 elections approach, Kennedy may find himself increasingly in the spotlight, not just as a senator, but as a counterbalance to rising progressive voices. And for voters seeking someone who can spar without shouting, who can clap back without losing decorum, Kennedy could become a touchstone of calm in an era of extremes. A cultural moment and a political inflection point. What made this exchange so electric wasn't just the words spoken, it was what they symbolized. Two sharply contrasting philosophies, two completely different styles, collided on a national stage. And the American public watched, shared, commented, and debated. In an increasingly polarized nation, these moments serve as more than entertainment. They act as litmus tests for who we are, what we value, and what kind of leadership we believe in. Do we want passion or pragmatism? Do we respond more to fire or finesse? And most importantly, can two such wildly different leaders coexist in the same democratic system? Those are the questions this moment surfaced. And as election season heats up, don't be surprised if both AOC and Kennedy lean into this confrontation, using it to draw contrasts, energize their bases, and redefine their public images. Already, PACs and campaign strategists are reportedly using clips from the hearing in fundraising emails and social media ads. Some progressives are calling for AOC to take the gloves off more often. Some conservatives are urging Kennedy to take the spotlight and lead. What's certain is that this was not just a blip. It was a defining moment in how modern politics are performed and perceived. It showed that today's leaders are not just lawmakers. They are symbols, storytellers, and sometimes sparring partners in a larger narrative about where the country is headed. Whether you admire AOC for her tenacity or Kennedy for his composure, one truth is inescapable. Politics isn't just about policies. It's about people, personalities, and power. And in this unforgettable congressional showdown, all three collided in a way that ensured neither figure will walk away unchanged. The next chapter is already being written, and the nation is watching.